Welcome to Bankford House. As part of Council's Stay, Connect, Create promotion, Cultural Heritage Services is recording a series of films about State Heritage listed Bankford House. The films aim to provide some ongoing connection to the site for you at home and highlight key sites, objects and anecdotes from this remarkable property and its extensive collection.
That was the kitchen dresser in this kitchen since 1930.
Imagine keeping your bills for 150 years.
The family were very resourceful and made their own pegs out of wire.
The timber for this room was recycled from the 1868 Bankford House.
So stay tuned for more stories and content to come.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Sunshine Coast Open House 2020 event. I'm Lindy Atkin, the Chair of the Sunshine Coast Open House Committee. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Kabi, Gubbi Gubbi and Jinabara traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place, and elders, both past and present. I recognise those whose ongoing effort to protect and promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures will leave a lasting legacy for future elders and the leaders. For this event, we are streaming live from the Mary Grigor Centre, next door to the Bankford House at Glasshouse Mountains. As with many events this year, this is the first time we have offered a virtual experience, so it is fitting that it is being held at this important historical environment, built within such an incredible natural landscape that our First Nations people have cherished and nurtured for centuries. In recognition of our wonderful region, the message from the Governor of Queensland, His Excellency the Honourable Paul de Jersey AC, reminds us that, alongside its natural beauty and enviable lifestyle, the Sunshine Coast also boasts a growing reputation for generating design concepts that celebrate the special character of the place itself. So, instead of inviting you to travel to our open houses this year, we are bringing some projects to you in the form of 4 short films which celebrate and communicate the process of design. These are the premieres of the Sunshine Coast Design Clips, produced by the Sunshine Coast Council's Design and Placemaking branch team, which has recently launched their Sunshine Coast Design book. As the Governor also says, for the professionals, dreamers, and for the merely curious, this is a chance to be inspired and educated, and to also hear from some of the architects themselves as they impart insights about what is possible with a strong design vision. This is our 4th annual event, which has generously been supported by the Sunshine Coast Council's Cultural Heritage Branch, the Environment and Sustainability Policy, the Design and Placemaking Branch, and the Australian Institute of Architects. So to formally commence the event, I would like to introduce you to Phil Smith, who is an architect and urban designer. Phil will be moderating the discussions this afternoon, and as anyone who has been privy to conversations with Phil will know, he is sure to ask some provocative questions, which may delight and surprise us. Welcome, Phil Smith.
Hello, I'm Phil Smith, your MC for this year's Sunshine Coast Open House Online Architectural Forum. I'd like to welcome you, our online audience, and thank you for joining us and our special guests here today at the historic Bankford House Heritage Precinct in the hinterland town of the Glasshouse Mountains. And well done to local architect Tim Ditchfield for such a fantastic setting for today's event. The Kabi and Jinabara people are the traditional custodians of the Sunshine Coast places, landscapes, and everything they contain. And for architects whose profession has a huge influence on the processes that impact on that landscape, it should be challenging for us to reflect on the fact that our First Nations people have never ceded sovereignty of this land. Design is certainly one of the tools that can help us all understand that conundrum and help us make sense of what that might mean. I was involved recently and I was very fortunate enough to be part of an event where grade 5 kids were given the opportunity to redesign Maroochydore, our regional centre. And local artist and proud Gubbi Gubbi man, Lyndon Davis, reminded the students to look out for the trees and the animals and to make places for them to live alongside everything else. And it's a simple and a powerful idea, but it struck me as being really poignant because it connected custodianship to the design process. So I'm delighted to be here today to explore this idea and others a little further by looking at 4 very different architectural projects from across the Sunshine Coast. They're all part of the evolving story and the continuous conversation that we regularly have about Sunshine Coast design, about places, about this landscape, about character, climate, people, time, the list goes on. Today's 4 design clips have been curated by Sunshine Coast Council's Design and Placemaking Services team. And so it's right for Sarah Chalkley, the manager of that group, to explain a little more about them. Sarah recorded something for us a little earlier.
Thanks so much, Phil. It's fantastic to be part of Sunshine Coast Open House this year. And it's great that we can bring the experience of understanding buildings at a deeper level to our Sunshine Coast Open House audience virtually during this somewhat unusual time. Today, you'll have the opportunity to see inside 4 fantastic buildings that are examples of really good design that have been specifically designed for here, for the Sunshine Coast. Like many places, we have our share of good and not so good design. And that's partly why we developed these clips and the Sunshine Coast Design Book, or what we call the Yellow Book. The Sunshine Coast Design Book is a hardcover book that has been developed to help educate, inspire, and encourage design that protects and enhances all that the community loves about the Sunshine Coast. The book is the first instalment of Sunshine Coast Design Strategy, which includes a suite of tools to help design our homes, our buildings, our parks, our public spaces, our streets, and our neighbourhoods. Sunshine Coast Design is for everyone designing, influencing, or funding design on the Sunshine Coast. And as part of the strategy, we are showcasing built examples that demonstrate the design principles that help communicate what good design on the Sunshine Coast looks like and explain why. So these 4 clips that we're about to see were produced by my team and Source Media. And I'm sure you'll agree that they are really fabulous videos. The team spent a couple of days interviewing and taking footage at the 4 different locations. And these clips are actually the short version. They're pretty much a snippet of what we could have shown. We have so much amazing information and footage from interviewing the designers and the clients of these buildings. And I think the full versions are about 20 minutes long, and we'll endeavour to get those up on the Sunshine Coast Design website in the future, because I think you'll really enjoy the full versions as well. It's very clear in the clip featuring Bark Architects' 2 Treehouse that Lindy and Steve and their clients Annie and Neil have a very strong connection to the site and the landscape. And this had a very powerful influence on the design. And then there's Tim Bennetton's joyful approach to design, which is reflected in the Moffat Beach House renovation, where we see a wonderfully respectful relationship between the old and new. And then developer Rob McCready from Ultim, who you'll hear from later in the True North clip, made a great point in his interview about the value of good design and how it inherently lifts people's spirits and sense of well-being. And for the Mary Cancross Scenic Reserve clip, we had the privilege of interviewing Senior Elder Uncle Noel Blair. We, Sunshine Coast Council, were the client for this project, and it's clear that under the lead of Phil Jackson from Guymer Bailey, this was a fantastic collaborative design and construction process. So while a good design process is holistic and every decision achieves a number of objectives, we have arranged the clips to move through relevant design principles from 1 to 10. I personally am really looking forward to hearing your questions today. We have all of the designers and clients on the panel, so this is a great opportunity to extend this conversation further. And we have some book giveaways, so make sure you have your questions ready. So I really hope you enjoyed the videos and this great online event. So thanks very much everybody, and enjoy the clips.
Thank you, Sarah. We look forward to Sarah joining us a little later on for our panel session at the end of the day. Some of you may have noticed that we're having a few technical issues this afternoon. Out here in the lovely, beautiful Glasshouse Mountains, we're surrounded by some pretty fantastic thunderstorms and clouds. So I think they're causing a little bit of havoc as part of our broadcast today. But I'm sure if you're patient, we'll resolve them, and anything we can't broadcast today, we'll put up at a later date if you can just be a little bit patient with us. So my job as MC here today is to guide you around this open house. So following the screening of each video, and each video is about 10 minutes long, we'll chat to each of the architects and some of the clients afterwards. We encourage you to make comments online, and we'll try and relay those questions to our special guests here today. And to finish today's session, we'll be inviting our special guests back to join us here on the bench to continue the conversation about Sunshine Coast design a little further and try and tease out some of the more complex issues. So please be sure to hang around for that. So, the dog's at the groomers, sent the kids down the park to play, told them not to come back for a couple of hours. I've picked up the toys, I've put down the toilet seat lid, I've straightened the cushions on the couch, and I've opened the windows on the western side to get the breeze into the place. So we're ready to open this house up, so please come on in. Our first clip today is the beautifully renovated Moffat Beach house, which is only, I think, 138 square metres, but amazingly has 7 living spaces. The renovation and extension were completed in 2010. After the video is played, please stick around for a conversation with the architect Tim Bennetton and the project client Lydia, who's generously agreed to join us here today. So please enjoy.
So this was a little beach shack which we had the pleasure of working on. You can see there's the existing house there, and then there's a new piece that was done behind. It was a streetscape of quite intact sort of little beach houses, which are slowly changing. And it also had had a really nicely established garden out the back, and it did actually have some nice established trees out on the streetscape as well. Short access to the north and south, and then a long access to the east and west. They're all important in terms of the context that we have to deal with. We did have a couple of problems with the existing house. So back in the 50s, they didn't think too much about orientation and really the benefits of where we live. But there was, on the old house, the garage faced north. So when we're talking about the benefits of being north, we really didn't want to end up with a garage still there. So we turned that into the main living area. And in order to try and maximise all the airflow, we took out all those little walls. So the air does flow all the way through. When you're standing on the street, we didn't want to get a whole lot of really big bulk and make it look like some sort of thing that wasn't a beach house anymore. And we were able, with this solution, to get a new bedroom which got all the benefits of northern light and air into it, but making it not look too big from the street. We really were aware that it would get hammered by some morning light on this side, and it would really get hammered by the afternoon light on this side. And we actually end up with a sort of an air buffer between this lightweight fabric wall here and the main wall of the house. By shading that wall, we were able to get a much more livable bedroom up the top. Often we probably wouldn't want to do a southern deck like this because it faces out to the south, it doesn't get as much light, but by taking that little roof over there, we were also able to have a kind of a nice, fun, double height space you can see in there. But we're also able to get all that northern light into it, so it becomes usable for most of the year. One of the great pioneers of design on the Sunshine Coast, Gabriel Poole, developed these pivot vent systems. Any of us who worked for him, and anyone who's probably walked through one of those houses, we've stolen that idea, and we try and do it wherever we can because it just works so well. And what we do is we put in a little slot in each corner with a vent that can pivot, and that allows all the air to be sucked through the house. With this particular house, we didn't put any air conditioning in at all, and there might have been a couple of days where Lydia might have liked some, but most of the time with the amount of air going through, and excluding all that heat, she found the house was really livable. Instead of the bathrooms being kind of leftover spaces, we were able to have a lot of fun by having a sort of a lower public bathroom and a laundry and an upper little ensuite, which can be opened up so you can again see through the whole building. You're always feeling connected to the outside environment. The other thing which we're able to do is to create a whole series of differing size outdoor spaces, which means even if there's a lot of people in quite a small house, some of them can be gathering here. There's a little sort of breakout of the old veranda connected to this room, which is a multi-purpose room anyway. And then we've got some other sort of more spacious outdoor living areas, which are also covered out the back. So wherever we can, we try and get an outdoor space which is covered so you can get the maximum use. And then up on the little upper bedroom, there's a little breakout sort of exterior space there. What we wanted to do here was to not build too much. We could have got a lot further back up the site and built more and built higher, but the choice was really made to try and retain as much of the landscape and then actually augment it. So there's a whole lot of fruit trees went in there, some lovely established trees here. There was chickens and I think she had native bees in there. So it was all about maintaining what we had, trying to improve it, and then really getting the major benefit out of it. So, you know, as many rooms as we can, trying to sort of get that visual connection and hearing all the birds and the bees. The client, she had lived in this house for quite a while. She really engaged with that part of the coast's identity, which is to do with those little lightweight beach shacks. And I think we all love them. We perhaps look at the problems with them and go, oh, let's get rid of it and build something more. But there is actually something which I think everyone that's come through the Sunshine Coast region just realises about these modest sort of fibre cement clad structures. So we were fortunate with Lydia. She really liked the house and she wanted to keep it. I think from a design point of view, it means you can respond to it. So while this doesn't look in any way perhaps like a traditional beach shack, we can get some relationships between what we're doing here, which is the new part, and what the old part is by using similar materials and looking at how the junctions work. So they're all quite sort of subtle. We're just trying to sort of hopefully enhance that experience of being by the beach and that great heritage that we actually have of these lightweight structures. With this sort of site, what we really wanted to do was to be able to say, well, what are the things that we could, you know, create views towards and vistas of? You know, there's bigger ones, there's smaller ones. So one of the ones that we really wanted to do was to create a long view all the way through the house. So that was done by removing those walls, as we said previously. Then you get that connection to the front garden. So you do get a view from the front garden. And you get a view from the old deck, which is a little bit higher, so it's a slightly different experience. And then out the back, you know, bathrooms are often leftover spaces, but we wanted to have some lovely views back in through the bathroom and from them to the existing landscape. And then we were able to create a whole range of that feeling of sort of distance and short distance and connection. And really, in the end, that's what views are all about. The new part of the house was inspired by how we live on the coast, but it also, so that's sort of at a broad level. And we know that being on the Sunshine Coast, which was traditionally, I guess, particularly Caloundra, a holiday destination, this did use, you know, the same materials as the beach shack, but it's clearly not trying to replicate the beach shack's forms. It's quite a contemporary thing. If we try to replicate exactly what's there, I think we're always disappointed by it. So that's use of materials, but then it also, we wanted to try and extend that through the whole way through the project. So the client Lydia and I one morning rode through the streets nearby and sort of said, well, we really like that colour or this colour. And so you can then really play up those things in quite a subtle way. So it may look like this is sort of a white house with green, but there's actually 3 different sorts of green. And each of those, I think, just enhances that experience of being by the beach. Whenever we talk to our clients by the beach, they take their shoes off. So the clients take their shoes off, and we like to think that these little houses have also taken their shoes off and lived in a much more sort of light and fun way, which if you can't do that on the Sunshine Coast, then you really can't do it anywhere. We wanted to explore how welcoming the entry experience is. And there's two real elements about it. It's a narrow site, so had we decided to do a garage, we would have blocked up probably at least 50% of the site. And that's a much less welcoming experience than perhaps doing a lightweight structure where you can see what's beyond. We've got some quite wide, generous steps which go the full width. We've noticed when people enter, you can just sit on those steps to talk to people. That little area between the sort of the outside of the house and fully being in the house is something which is actually a really important part of all of our experiences. So when we considered, sustainability on a sort of more broad, from a more broad point of view, one of the main moves that we had was really to try and reuse as much of the existing building as we can. So by doing that, you're not demolishing it, you're not putting it into landfill, you're actually keeping it and reusing it. And then that cascades down to more minor decisions, but they all do reinforce each other. We try and use low emission paints, which are much healthier for the applicators. We maybe get some better quality fixtures and fittings, the view being that they'll last a lot longer. So you might have to spend a little bit more now, but you don't have to replace them all in a few years when they all corrode, because it is quite near the beach. In order to get as much benefit of the climate as we can, it was pretty heavily insulated, so it reduces a lot of the running costs. And you always do have a choice. You can build something big, you may be able to build it reasonably cheaply, but you might have to spend a lot of money on air conditioning and on heating.
We'd looked at a lot of houses in the area, and this must have been about the 10th plus, and this one left an impression that the others hadn't.
It looked like a little modest beach shack from the front, and so we were initially attracted just because it looked like part of the Sunshine Coast landscape. But walking in, it was just incredibly impressive. The space, the light, the design. So we were wowed as soon as we walked through the front door. We love the fact that there are so many different living areas. For a small house, they've done an amazing job at building in the different living
That's the most impressive thing for me, I think, because we lived in Brisbane for 30-odd years in a couple of quite large houses. But even in those large houses, we did not have anywhere near the number of different living areas as we do in this much smaller house. So we can have two grown-up children and relatives here all at the same time, and we don't have to go far to be completely on our own.
Often as general public, the marketing messages are, we need to spend more on this particular shiny item or that particular shiny item. And a lot of it probably is also the message, build it bigger. Why don't you have a 3-car garage, not a 1-car garage? Why don't you have a media room? What we believe is if you can really question people as to what makes a special experience in their lives and then reflect that into the design, that gives them a huge amount of joy for a long period of time, much more than it will be to get a granite benchtop or a fancy front door.
At the moment, I'm looking at the camera, but right behind that camera, we can see the Glasshouse Mountains, and we can see this big black clouds rolling across towards us. And in the 10 minutes since that video has been broadcasting to you, the rain has started to fall here. So it's this classic Queensland scenario of a moody Saturday afternoon with dark clouds and rain on a tin roof, and it's quite superb, I have to say. So, look, we are privileged to have some special guests in the house with us today. I'd like to introduce you to our online audience. I'd like to introduce you to the architect of the Moffat Beach house, Tim Bennetton. Tim, hello. Welcome.
Thank you, Phil.
And the original client for the house, Lydia. Lydia, thanks for your time.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So I'm sure, like the rest of our audience, it was such a beautiful story that you told about the house and all of the makings of it. One of the things that really struck me about its success was there was a clear collaborative relationship between the both of you. Lydia, would you like to talk about how that worked?
Well, it was quite organic, really. I think when you start off with going to an architect, you don't know how it's going to go. But there's a lot of early discussions about what your vision might be, and I think pretty early on I could sense that Tim understood what I was saying.
Yes.
And he's very cruisy in that he was never trying to sway or judge what you're saying. So it was very easy. Well,
I mean, one of the challenges within, building a design project like that is allowing yourselves, either as a client or a designer, to have the time it takes to not just build a relationship, but to talk about ideas. I got the impression that you seem to give yourselves the luxury of time to be able to build that relationship.
I'm quite slow, Phil. I'm quite slow.
Well, I mean, that's a great way to go. That's part of your process though, Tim. You take your time.
I do think it's really important. The difference between an architect and an artist, say, is that you're really trying to, it's something that you might have a vision for, but it's a vision on behalf of your client. So you're really trying to understand their desires and needs. And so that is a pretty important part, I think, to get something which not only that you, a designer, is happy with, but it really is on behalf of someone else. They're going to be the ones that live in it, and they're the ones that you're doing it for. So that's very important.
But investing time in that relationship sounds important, or seemed important. The idea that you would get on your bikes and ride around the neighbourhood and have a conversation is a lovely idea. It's a lovely collaborative approach. Yeah,
that was about 2 months probably before it was finished. So we hadn't chosen colours. So so it was right around with the colours.
Look, the project's close to my heart because it's in my neighbourhood. I know that area very well, and one of the challenges of the Dickey, Moffat Beach, Shelley Beach areas, there are a lot of those traditional houses that are going. It seems to me, as a resident, a fairly brave move to keep the house and work with it. It's not what a lot of other people are doing, sadly, in that area. Was that an obvious choice for you, Lydia?
It was. I think growing up in Brisbane, I grew up in a city, and I always loved, when I was at uni and working, I loved the really old Queenslanders, and I always aspired, wouldn't it be nice to live in one of those grand veranda-clad sort of Queenslanders? So I'd always loved the old houses anyway, and that's probably the first house that I had bought that was old. It wasn't very pretty at first, but I don't know, I just felt something there that felt like a beach house, and I wanted to hold on to that feeling.
And Tim spoke about your desire for simplicity and a simple approach for things. It sounds like that was almost a prerequisite as well, that kind of drove you down the path of possibly keeping.
Well, I don't know what clients are usually like, but Tim asked us for a brief, and I don't remember much on it, but I know the first thing was airflow, and the second one was storage. I wanted enough cupboards to put things in. So it wasn't about having a grand entry or a foyer, or it wasn't actually about how the house would look. It was more about how it was going to feel.
Well, I think also, though, in your initial brief, it also mentioned the importance of the garden. So there was some really lovely established trees there. So you could see that Lydia was interested in maintaining that part of it. It wasn't about maximising the house.
Which is often the way in those, for want of a better term, gentrified suburbs. It's about maximising market value, but clearly the desire to try and keep the footprint fairly small on a long, thin, most 10 by 40 metres this block. That would have been a bit of a challenge.
Well, again, it's how much you want to fit into that site. And when you go up to 2 stories, then, I mean, only the back half's 2 stories, but that does allow you to add a fair bit of, floor space. The thing that's, in my memory, that stands out the most is that, we generally love the idea of those beach shacks, and it's because it's a lovely modest scale. It's like, maybe it is relate to when we're children, and it's probably a better scale for children in a way than it is for adults. You run down the beach, so we love the idea of it, but we don't often commit enough to keeping them. But they also have quite a few problems. So the old beach house, asbestos roof, fine if you don't move it, but there's no insulation. The rooms are really small. It was that sort of era where it was almost too small to fit a bed in and walk around it. So the challenge was trying to, I guess, open those things up so that it did breathe more and work a lot better as a house.
Yep.
And it isn't just the sort of the nice image of a beach house. It actually should work for you as a beach house.
We were chatting earlier about the decision to keep the house, and it was partly informed, I think, by economics and the fact that the existing house was actually worth something a square metre that you couldn't rebuild.
Yeah.
Was that the conversation that you had together?
I don't know that we ever even talked about a new house. I can't remember.
I think we may have had an early one, but for yours it was... So usually with all projects, I guess many people are, I think, often worried about going to architects. Like, well, if I don't want a huge house, then why would I bother to go to an architect? I can do something, I can just get someone to draw that up for me, is the idea. But whatever project you go with, at some point it always comes down to how much do we need to build and how much is that going to cost. So if you knock something over and you pay 20 grand to put it all into landfill, you do have to then rebuild that. So we knew on Lydia's, it was 100 odd square metres of existing house, that when that was built, that was about $200,000 worth of new build.
Yes.
So it actually, we did talk about it in some way, but we could work out quite quickly on yours that it was worth
keeping.
Trying to keep it.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact your other house,
Yeah.
it wasn't as nice a house. They had one up the road as well. And it was much more of a difficult decision because that one we could see some potential for. Yeah.
So you're no longer the owner of the house, Lydia. Was it hard to let it go?
Yeah, terribly hard. So just life changes and your requirements change, and we just needed a house with the child where you're not sleeping at the back in a separate sort of zone to where the rest of the household might be.
Near the beach.
Yeah, I'm in a better spot location-wise, closer to the beach now. But when it was on the market, I went to every open house, and every time I'm there, like, oh, this house is so beautiful. It was so hard seeing it presented for sale where it was clean and perfect and beautiful.
Audience, you might not be able to hear it, but the rain on the roof is really cranking up in the last few seconds. It's quite beautiful, but it's very hard to hear it ourselves. But anyway, so I mean, clearly the process and the journey that you've both been on added a lot of value, to the property. When you came to sell the house, Lydia, did you reflect on that value, not just from a market point of view, but did you sort of reflect on the idea that the process of engaging and working with Tim added more value than you would otherwise have had if you'd gone down another path?
Absolutely. Like I enjoyed that build so much.
Yeah.
And I work in science, and so I don't do anything creative really. And it was really nice. I mean, I think architectures are incredible because you're very mathematical people, but you're actually artists as well. And it was just beautiful watching that because I'd never been able to tap into that.
Yeah.
I remember Tim on the roof one day working out this angle, and he was in algebra, you use sine, cos and tan, and he was doing it from first principles on a phone calculator, and I was like, oh, that's amazing, he's using mathematics. So I get how much value there is in using an architect.
Look, it is an interesting mix in skill set. It is about art and creativity and design, but there's an incredibly pragmatic, buildable approach to architecture that just seems to be inherent in the profession. So we've had a question from one of our online contributors. I think Francis Harper asks the question that you talked, Tim, about Northern Light and the importance of Northern Light, but you don't talk about access to the warmth that you get in wintertime from the north. And the garage partly blocks sort of that. So you obviously had a strategy for building around the back and getting light in over the top. Can you talk a little bit more about some of that decision-making process?
Yep, it's a good question. Thank you, Francis. So when I talk about Northern Light, what I'm really talking about is the benefits from the Northern Light. And obviously the big benefit you get in our climate is in winter you get that Northern Light in, which is all about the warmth. So in shorthand I say Northern Light, but the reality is it's actually not just getting light into the room, but it is getting the warmth in winter.
Yeah. And it's the benign light that you can protect a lot
That's
easily,
it.
more
So
easily from.
we all talk about northeast aspect being good, but you need to understand why it's good, and that is because we can keep out all the summer sun that we don't want to get in, but we can let the sun in winter. Yeah. It is true that the carport, ideally, we'd like to put somewhere else because it did block some of the northern light to the old garage. But if you look closely at the video, there's a carport roof, and then there's a clear polycarb, a clear plastic skylight above that. So we actually do get, between the roof and the carport roof, we do actually get some northern light in there. And that's, I guess, it's not so much a compromise, but you've always got things that you have to solve. And you get as close as you can to ideal, but you can't always get the perfect answer. So it's perfectly legitimate for someone to say, I need to protect my car, and I want to protect my car, and I can use some of that space as a shaded space as well. So then you're trying to get light in other ways. So we did the best we could. We still got quite a bit into the old garage space. And then the living room next door, which was the old entry, then that got a lot of northern light. So
it still amazes me when those lots. My understanding was they were post-war return soldiers lots in the late 40s, 50s, and they're quite small, 400 square metres, 10 by 40. And 80 years later, the Sunshine Coast is now, trying to rediscover or rethink about how we build on small lots through either terrace house typologies or attached housing. There are some really interesting lessons in the Moffat Beach house that I think some clever left field designers could really start to apply maybe to some of these other housing typologies. So anyway, watch this space. But thank you for sharing your time with us all today and for being really open and generous with your time. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks, everyone.
Rightio, we're on to our second video, online audience. And so for our second video, you'll be looking at a detached single dwelling residential building that is effectively referred to as the Two Tree Houses by Bark Architects. This is a much loved project that was completed in 2016, and it's much loved because I think it's been a favourite of Open House over the last couple of years, and quite a number of you have already been through this fantastic house. But we hope that the rest of you who haven't seen this house will enjoy exploring it virtually today.
Our background was from living in the UK, so that was Victorian terraced houses, tenement flats in Scotland. These are traditionally quite small dwellings with one bathroom, a couple of bedrooms and one living space and maybe a separate kitchen. So we were not used to large, sprawling houses. We were not used to or required ensuite bathrooms. Things like that we didn't need. So that, in a way, guided the design, or simplified it, really.
Neil and Annie, even though they've come from living in Scotland, they've actually really embraced the idea of living in the subtropics. And
maybe that's kind of a celebration of being in Australia, in the Sunshine Coast, and kind of going...
liberated.
Kind of let's take advantage of this through design.
But because we had the neighbours on the east and the west, and it was really sandwiched between, it's still a decent sized site, we closed down the western aspect to protect from that western sun, and the eastern to a certain extent, but opened right up to the north where the views are, but also to the south to catch those cross ventilation breezes and to protect from privacy, but also protect from the sun.
The north-south axis of the breezeways are really set up as the lungs of the house. Whether it's a north breeze or a southeasterly, the breezeway funnels that breeze into the spaces.
If the kitchen's the heart of the house or the hearth of the house, then the breezeway is the lungs of the house. We really needed to provide spaces that connected the inside to the outside with decking. You get the breeze up underneath the decks and everything, but you also get the extension of space so that it feels bigger. And all of the spaces, the living spaces, the kitchen, the bedrooms, they all open out onto an external space of some sort. We designed all of the spaces so they could be naturally ventilated. There's no air conditioning in this house. And one of the principles we really followed was making sure that you get cross ventilation from one side of the room to the other. So you've got to have at least 2 openings and not just rely on an internal door. And so all of the spaces in this house have access to ventilation, natural ventilation, and most of them, 80 to 90% of them, actually have good cross ventilation. And that's the way that you can live without air conditioning. You just make sure you get great airflow.
And the idea of the 2 pavilions and the breezeway benefits that by allowing extra wall area for that natural light and ventilation into most of the spaces.
It's actually really nice to see how Neil and Annie almost rig the house. It's a bit like sailing, you know. You rig the spinnaker when there's a fabulous wind behind it to take advantage of it. So the fins on the side channel the breezes as you need them, and the sunlight as well. And you can see on the ones over facing east at the moment where the morning sun has been coming through to warm the space up, they're wide open. But the ones on the west at the moment are semi-closed, so ready for the afternoon sun. But you can still maintain the views through there. So the breeze and the sun, it all works together.
The battens in the breezeway provide a sort of filter to like a harsh sun condition. So we want as much natural light, but really reducing the heat. But that's a practical thing. But from a kind of more poetic standpoint, they provide this lovely marker of time, and they they dapple the light, which is, for us, it's so Sunshine Coast, is that quality of dappled light, light and shade, and the patterns, beautiful changing patterns that you can get, and really kind of it registers the time of day for Neil and Annie in terms of the way the light's dropping and casting shadows on the wall, the floor, back up the other wall, even in the moonlight. We knew that this site was challenging topography-wise because it was really steep and it had a pre-existing cut and fill before Neil and Annie bought the property. But we were looking at ways to actually make it a positive thing, that the site had been cut fairly brutally, I suppose.
Pretty radically.
And
actually.
kind of how can this project actually repair that topography and make the most of living up in the trees? So it was about, the height limits, the current drainage patterns, maintaining. The key environmental concerns for us were the roots of the trees. There's so many aspects of citing an environmental consideration when starting a project. The client and the architect recognised that the trees and the topography and rocks were a significant character of the site. They wanted to keep it intact and actually enhance it. So the strategy of the house was all about doing that in terms of the foundation design, the way it's perched up high in the trees. And, it was kind of like saying, what's the magic part of the site? Okay, let's not lose it. Let's work with that to make it even better. So on a practical level, to keep the trees safe, the foundations couldn't go into the root zone. But to make the most of the site and the height limit and the views, the house needed to perch off the side of the hill in a way.
Hover above.
And so it was this kind of thing about the footings had to be back, the house had to be forward. And so I guess that's, from a practical point, that gave the house its form in terms of the columns and foundations underneath.
The trees really give the place scale.
Yeah.
And if you took the trees away, the house would be different. The verticalities of the trees gives a beautiful framing to those long distance views, and the views are very horizontal, sort of punctuated by Mount Ninderry and Mount Coolum. So you've got this lovely horizontality and this beautiful verticality, and to capture those, sort of to frame those views, is really important.
And I guess there's 2 key views. There's on arrival at the entry at the end of the breezeway, you've got this really long distance framing of the gum tree at the end, and it's kind of a very vertical kind of framing of landscape. And then when you come into the main living space and the deck, it's all about that horizontal prop of the long distance view of the range across. Yeah, I guess as a tree house, and it's from the view from the street, you're looking up, and it could tend to be imposing, but it's really the trees help give the house scale and make the house seem smaller in relation to the whole hillside.
There's just a classic character of the Sunshine Coast, which, quite often embraces the old fibro beach shack, the fishing shacks and things.
And there's kind of no fuss sort of authenticity and based on function, based on economy sort of response. And that idea of making a house that feels like you're on holiday.
The material palette that we worked with here is a lot of timbers, natural timbers, spotted gum, for example. The colours were drawing from the environment, so the trunks of the trees, which are that silvery gum grey ash sort of colour, plus the black. Some of the darker trunks of the trees have the black and the neutral natural tones. It's almost like a blank canvas ready for life to take place on. So the colourful things come from the family's things.
It's really open to the street. Neil and Annie aren't really fence people, but I think it contributes to a friendly connection between the street and the house. And the security in this house is at the front gate, which is at the end of the breezeway.
I actually think this house would work equally as well for an older couple or an older family, because some of the things that we consider on all projects is trying to get the flush thresholds, have wide enough hallways or openings so that it suits everybody.
But just having an easy living environment, so spaces flow into each other quite seamlessly from indoors to outdoors and vice versa. But there's a kind of easiness to living in this house. There's two aspects to modular design that we enjoy, and one is the economical aspect of reusing standard building components, therefore reducing waste, reducing materials that you use. But the other side is expressing that in the aesthetic of the construction, so that you kind of express that the sheet cladding is sheets that are kind of 12 by 2400, and I guess the aesthetic comes from the act of building.
And if you do want to modify any of the spaces or the architecture in the future, those standard size components are really easy to replace and easy to work in with a regular grid on future modifications.
Sustainability was a consideration in the selection of the material palette. We've got Queensland hardwoods, plantation grown pine framing, readily accessible, recyclable steel, hardwood plywood. These are all materials that are kind of very easily renewable and add to the ongoing resilience and kind of sustainability of the house.
We designed this house with plenty of light and plenty of natural ventilation because it reduces energy costs significantly without the need for air conditioning.
The economics of the project meant that solar would be a future addition, but putting the infrastructure in the first part of the build was, fairly critical.
When we designed the house, we thought about the way it should be lit and the way that it should be powered, and really wanted to keep the power system simple rather than going with a C-bus or something that's a bit more complex, because on, off and dim is just a lot more future-proofing of the technology.
It's also part of that easy living sort of house.
One of the most valuable things about the house is the fact that it's actually done fairly economically.
Not only in its initial construction, but also in its ongoing costs. In terms of adding value to livability, the key one there is really about how the house feels, how the spaces feel, and how they make you feel. Like the experience of the house is probably paramount in terms of how comfortable you are as an occupant or human in the space.
One of the biggest compliments we get, and particularly with this house, is that it just makes you feel good. The spaces feel great.
So it's less about aesthetics and more about kind of, comfort.
One of the things that we really strived for was to design a house that was going to be really timeless as well, so that it doesn't date. And that really adds value in terms of holding its value over the decades.
Engaging architects, I guess a lot of people get frightened that it's going to be a really costly affair, but for us it was, you know, it helped us save on areas that we probably would have spent more money on, but we didn't need to, in terms of like having higher ceilings, making the space feel bigger, and using materials that were sustainable, and hard wearing as well. Things that we splashed out on a little bit were more decorative things like lighting, but otherwise Steve and Lindy were brilliant in cost saving exercises, like, you know, having everything was a standard size so we didn't have to have things custom made, you know, changing a cement floor to the plywood, which we're so glad we did, because that was a huge cost saving thing for us, and we just love the warmth that it brings to the house as well, because we don't have air conditioning or anything like that. We have like ceiling fans, and then we do have the louvers, and especially having the ones up high, you just get that flow through of air all the time.
My friends like coming over to my house because of all of the light and how spacious and breezy it is in the hallway.
Yeah.
And when we run, we don't get that hot because of a nice breeze coming from the sea, then we just get pretty much all of it.
Yeah, awesome.
Welcome back to Open House Central, Open Housos. We hope you find yourself in a nice, dry, warm place. The rain is still chucking it down outside here. It's the sort of weather that makes architects a little bit nervous, I think, at times, you know, thinking about leaky roofs and other bits and pieces. But we hope you're in a safe, warm place. It's a beautiful sort of conditions for cuddling up and watching some videos, I reckon. So hopefully that's what you're doing now. So it's my pleasure to be joined by one of the architects from the house, the video that you've just watched, Lindy Atkin from Bark Design. Welcome, Lindy.
Thanks, Phil.
Congratulations to you and Steve. I know Steve can't be here today, which is a shame. But congratulations to you and Steve, and also to Neil and Annie for a really successful collaboration. And what I was struck by with that video, that it really is a joyful building.
Yeah.
And that's it was a great process, I expect, for you.
Yeah, look, Neil and Annie just love the spaces. I think they love that they're living outside most of the time, because, you know, most of that house is all about the outside and about the connections between the spaces.
Yeah.
So,
you both talk in the video about this idea of easy living. Is that what sits at the heart of one aspect of Sunshine Coast design for you?
oh, look, absolutely. I mean, easy living meaning you can just keep the whole house. This is a classic day, for example. You can, a measure of success for us is if you have a storm like this, that you can still have everything wide open, everything's protected, you can enjoy the smell of the rain, and you can hear it and you can wander in and out, but still be protected. Easy living in that, you know, in these days, you can actually work from home, you can, you know, homeschool. Easy living that you can just come back from the beach and the house is resilient enough to be able to withstand everything that comes in with it, especially with young children like Neil and Annie.
Sure. Yeah. It's a hallmark of the work that Bark Design produces, I think, that the work is very refined and very simple looking, but we know that it's like writing, you know, a short letter. You have to put a lot more work into a simple building to make it appear simple. It's a deception that we all understand. But is that, do you and Steve really refine and spend a lot of time refining down your ideas to get them to their most simplest form, or does it happen a bit more naturally?
Look, I think, you know, after some years of working on designs, a lot of it is intuitive now. But I think most projects that we work on become better because you're working with budgets. Every project has a budget. Doesn't matter whether it's huge up in the millions or small. Neil and Annie's was a budget for what they wanted. But you always start by putting everything in. And then as you develop the brief and the design with the client, you realise that actually taking some things out makes it better.
Yes.
And the more that you simplify things and reduce the palette and simplify the spaces, I think it actually becomes a better project.
One of the common denominators between Two Tree House and also the previous project at Moffat Beach House, for me, is well-informed clients who have fairly modest briefs to start with. Rather than coming at you with and wanting the kitchen sink, they have already done some work to kind of really prune back their expectations. Is that helpful for you as a designer? Yeah, look,
Neil and Annie had actually come from the UK, and they were living in a very small place. They only had one bathroom, and that was all they needed at the time. And even though they have the 2 children now, they still just have that one bathroom, a separate toilet, which is handy, but they didn't come with high expectations. They came with an open mind, but they also came with some really simple ideas about how they wanted to live. And when I say open mind, one of the things that we challenged them with was having the 2 pavilions and the breezeway in between, having 2 young children that actually have to go outside and then come back in again. Not many houses are like that. It's a little bit like camping, going from one tent to another. But yes, they had probably, I think, not educated as much as just curious and wanting to inform themselves about good design and listening to us as we explain why. And whenever we put together the drawings to explain the first principles, we always start with the site and with the microclimate, where the sun's coming from, where the wind is coming from, and those things inform a few of the really practical aspects of the design. But then we overlay that with the way they want to live and the things that they love around them, and how the children are their needs are going to change as well. So.
Another common aspect, in just speaking to Tim and Lydia about the previous project, there was an aspect that some people who were looking to buy that previous house didn't like. They had to go outside to access some of the rooms as well. And it's really interesting that you say that that's a feature of the program of this building. Was there a design idea behind that, which was about, and I wonder if there was, possibly about exposing your clients to the elements or to the outside and indoor, outdoor, that whole kind of slipperiness between the two?
Well, look, we just live in the most perfect climate. Subtropics is we hardly need any heating or cooling. In fact, that house has no air conditioning, and you just don't need it. Because if you concentrate on good cross-flow ventilation, you've always got the comfort that you need in this climate. But it's also about making a breathable building, and that breezeway constantly breathes. And I guess the main thing in terms of security, we've got the gate at the entrance. So you can lock the gate and the whole house is completely secure, but all the windows and doors are open. So.
I'm glad you mentioned the breezeway. One of the most beautiful aspects of the Two Tree House design for me, and you talk about it in the video, is the way that the breezeway is a device to measure time through light and shadow. It's such a lovely idea. And I mean, time is a challenging thing for architects to sort of talk about or address, other than shadow in an architectural program, but it's something that you obviously think a fair bit about.
Well, we do, and having this polycarbonate on the roof, which is clear, and so you can kind of see the blue sky through it when you look up. We very rarely use that in a place where it's enclosed because it can get too hot in the subtropics. So in that breezeway, it's perfect because you've always got the air moving through. You're not actually going to spend a lot of time there, and if it is hot, you just don't sit in that sunny part. But it is wonderful just kind of watching the pattern of the light moving across it.
The other thing that you and Steve talk about in the video that I was really interested in is the idea that when you design a house for a client, you possibly also thinking that they may not be the people that are living in it in 20, 30, 40 years' time. And that's a really important idea, because we all think that houses are designed for one client, but they're not. The houses are sort of bits of infrastructure that last, and multiple people will live and own and love these things over time. So you talk about the importance of getting aspects of the design right so different user groups can enjoy the building.
Well, look, different user groups, but also even the same user group, that same family is going to be a different family in 10 years' time.
That's true.
Gilly and Fergus are young at the moment. One's in its teens and one's under 10. But, in 10 years' time, they might not even be there anymore. Well,
it's true.
Fergus might not be. So, and also they may have ageing relatives staying with them.
Yes.
I mean, that house is all on one level, which is great because it's accessible in that respect. But it's also very much open plan and lightweight construction that you can adapt, structurally if you need to. So, on the other hand, look, timelessness is something that we really aim for, not just the time of the day and knowing how the sun's moving, but timelessness in terms of, in 20 years' time, is that house going to look dated, or is it going to be, oh gosh, that's definitely a 2000 and something house? We hope not.
Yes.
We hope that it's still got a little bit of the ephemeral nature of the coastal beach shacks in it, which, I mean, those are timeless.
Of course.
So.
No, look, I don't think you have any worries about that, Lindy. It will continue to be a joyful house into the future. Thanks for your insights and for the chat now. I look forward to having a bit more of an extended chat with you with the rest of the special guests a bit later on.
Sure. Thanks, Phil. Thanks.
So we've got a couple of questions from our online audience, but we might address those as we go, just to make sure that we can keep things going along. I'm sort of getting a little bit too engrossed in the conversation. Sorry about that, online audience. I'll try to be a slightly better MC as we move along. So on to our third video clip. So this project is a partnership between Sparks Architects and developer Alton that was completed in 2010. It's an award-winning example of how to achieve a more sustainable medium density building outcomes in the heart of Maroochydore, our regional city centre. So please enjoy the third video.
We spoke to Dan and said, look, we want to create a product here. We found a great site with some good aspect. It's going to rent well in that area. But let's create something that is a bit punchier and a bit bolder and spacious, but at the same time, really ensuring that we keep the building as an efficient structure as possible to minimise those structural costs.
So True North is a 15-unit multi-residential building in which we were able to explore ideas of beach house design and beach house aesthetics on a much larger scale and in a way that is appropriate for a building in the Sunshine Coast. Probably to me the primary design moves with True North were about doing the simple things well and making sure that we were getting good, passive, sustainable design solutions integrated into the design from the get-go. So we were fortunate with this particular site that it ran east-west, and we were able to orientate the entire building or all units to True North. We also were very conscious of the desire to have only single unit depth to the building so that all units could enjoy good cross ventilation, and all living spaces were facing north as well, so they all get good winter sun, good northeasterly breezes, and we're screening out the western sun, the early morning eastern sun, and also the westerly winds. All windows are openable, and we can vent air through all rooms. Every bedroom and living space allows for cross ventilation. On the upper level, we have a higher ceiling, and we've got a mezzanine. And we have high louvers, which again allow for the hot air to vent. So on the Sunshine Coast, we enjoy a beautiful subtropical, benign climate, and much of our life is spent outdoors and enjoying that climate. So it was paramount that all of these units enjoyed an opportunity to embrace that climate, but in a way that allowed for protection from the elements as well, be it summer sun or rain. We focused on creating that protection where necessary, but also allowing to move beyond it so that people can get out and feel the sun on them or can experience a bit of rain as well, which I think is really important. With True North, which was pretty much a blank canvas, it was a flat site. There wasn't anything there to respond to or to retain. And the building itself was going to consume a lot of that site with respect to the footprint of the building and car parking and vehicular circulation, etc. But we were very conscious of getting as much landscaping in there as we possibly could. And that included courtyard gardens to the ground floor, vertical green walls to the east and the west to help with sun shading, and street planting, creating canopies for the footpath, and also canopy tree planting to the car park itself. There was also the opportunity for the spaces, the external spaces, be it a balcony or a courtyard or a walkway along the back, to engage with bigger views beyond the site itself and start connecting the larger landscape with the building. When True North was first built, Sunshine Cove was relatively undeveloped and we didn't know what was going to be built in front of the building. So we're quite conscious of creating views, particularly on the ground floor where those views to the water were most likely going to be lost. So we created courtyard gardens and street planting to create canopies for the first floor. And then once you get up above the first floor, views, long views, were a lot more attainable. But the living spaces and the bedrooms, the master bedrooms for each unit, frame those long views, be it to a long view to a mountain range or a tighter view to a tree canopy or indeed a courtyard garden. Good design, you're not necessarily conscious of it. You feel it, and as soon as something isn't right, you're a lot more conscious of it. So as soon as you see clutter from bins, or you look down from a balcony and you see cars parked, you become a lot more aware of the visual noise of it. But when it's subtle and tucked away, it's a lot more calming, but you appreciate the spaces a lot more. It's a bit of a challenge to want to play with a coastal vernacular or a nostalgic idea of a beach house, be it through form and materiality, and reinterpret it on the scale of a 15-unit building. But what we hoped to achieve in doing that was to provide some sort of contextual relevance to the building, but also to give it a strong and simple identity to respond to or react to the potential visual noise that you get in a lot of these subdivisions, where everything's quite busy and broken down with respect to forms and materials. So we were very keen to keep both the form of the building and the material palette both simple and perhaps a little contextually relevant with respect to its coastal environment. The materials that we chose to use are very robust. They're very cost effective, but importantly, they talk of a Sunshine Coast vernacular as well. So we used fibre cement sheet cladding with over battens. We used trim deck metal sheeting for wall cladding and for roofing, translucent roof sheeting details to the east and the western elevation, recycled hardwoods, and just simple rendered block as well. And we used quite deep colours into areas that we wanted the building and the form of the building to recede, and then lighter colours where we wanted to express the shell-like form of the east and west elevation folding into the roof plane.
We also like, with our developments, to ensure that there's a range of products so that we get that cross-section of the community, because we often find that when we deliver a range of different products and we get a cross-section of community and children and middle-aged people and elderly people, we get a community within that built environment.
Yeah, that's really important. So from a design perspective, we were very aware of the opportunity to create a community within the building itself. In a building that is quite efficient spatially, we've got a lot of units going on within a small area, but we strove to create opportunities that are quite subtle but still allow for a degree of social interaction between people from various units. So the northern decks or terraces, we push them a little further forward than the party walls dividing them to allow for people to talk and interact with other people in the building. We also created what I call the sort of sunrise and sunset decks on each level at the eastern and western ends. It's just a little spot where a couple or even an individual might be able to wander out to and you know, watch the sunrise or the sunset. And the access corridors servicing the units along the southern side are quite deep, and we detailed a handrail that was quite deep as well, so people could come out from the units, break out from the interior space of their units to a space where they could mingle with other people as well. So they're small and subtle moves, but they do allow for and also encourage a larger degree of social interaction between the people living in the building. With the design of True North, we're very conscious of designing solutions to the whole of life costs of the building. And that comes down to the selection of materials. It comes down to even the dimensions of the building to reduce construction waste, integrating items such as a photovoltaic array to minimize costs to the tenants and owners, and also reducing costs in time, obviously, to the environment as well. The building structure is predominantly concrete, which is obviously a material with a high embodied energy. And we take the approach that if we do use concrete in our buildings, that we do it in a way where that aspect of the building is hopefully going to last for a very long time, many, many decades. And then we couple that with lighter weight elements that can be swapped and changed over time.
So what we achieved with Sparks Architects, it was a really efficient grid system where we could build the core structure up on grid, and then internally within that grid, we created enough space to create a really nice unit. But as Dan was mentioning, the flexibility where down the track that's adaptable, because we don't have load-bearing walls within the footprint of the grid of the unit.
That's right. So 2 units could become a larger unit, ground floor units could become shops, home offices can happen. It's just a very flexible system.
It's not just the younger people that are moving into the media density. We're actually seeing a shift with people in their 70s, even 80s. What I think the challenge is to create that medium density product that people really do feel like it's a home, particularly if they've come from a house, a single dwelling, and moving into medium density. You need to ensure that the spaces are right, the storage is right, the aspect, the cross ventilation is there, and that's the challenge.
The privacy,
yeah,
the balance of privacy and you know, sort of more social engaging opportunities.
You're going to naturally have that higher interaction between your residents, and so you want to make that a positive thing. You can't avoid it, it's going to happen. So let's create those spaces within the development that enhances the interaction that residents have, and make it a bit of a fun thing. Get them socialising, have spaces where they can socialise.
With True North, we were able to work with a developer who understood the value of design and, importantly, the value of a rational design process. And this is incredibly important because it adds value to them. It adds value to the people who experience that building, and ultimately it adds value to the greater environment.
We like to invest in quality architecture. We find that it gives us a sustainable outcome in terms of our buyers, our investors. If people are buying a high quality product, it tends to deliver them a greater return financially with capital gain. And a lot of our buyers have been actually multiple buyers. They followed us because they know that when they buy with us, their property is going to improve in value. Almost all the tenants are long term. They all love the building. They don't want to leave. And there's families there that have actually shared a unit, and some have moved on and had children, and then others have moved in and had children. They really treat it as their own home. And I think that's a measure of success for when you are building a rental product and people stay there for 10 years.
I think from all the apartments that I've been in and looked at and inspected before we decided on this place has been really clearly designed to have a lot of really open feel, lots of windows that allow to maximize the natural light, and it's, I believe, north facing, and it just gets so much sunlight, and we just have to never really rely on having lights on during the day, and we get so much breeze through, which is amazing and keeps us nice and cool. I guess one of the benefits of allowing us to get so much light is the open balconies and not having those dividers in that would really block off a lot of that light. And then in that we get interaction with our neighbours when we're out there having our morning coffees. We can say hello, and just adds a real social aspect to being at home that you don't get in apartments very often.
Yeah, often when we have people over, we'll go out there for a while as well, and it just gives that extra bit of space as well as, you know, feeling open and airy. And we've learnt a lot from living in such an airy, open apartment that it is possible to do so much with a small space, that we can get that indoor-outdoor feeling. We can have the ventilation and the light, as well as access to all the walking tracks and the waterways, without having to take care of a big piece of land. Yeah.
Welcome back, Open House online audience, to our 2020 Open House Architectural Online Forum. Hope you're enjoying it, the videos, as much as we are here, the production team. We're having some great conversations behind the scenes and really enjoying the conversation, and we expect to see that reflected in your questions online, which seem to be coming through thick and fast. And I'm being told there are some really great engaging debates happening on social media, so that's wonderful as well. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the architect from the project you've just seen, Dan Sparks, architect. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Phil.
Congratulations on a great project. It's obviously really enjoyable for you to work on a project like that. I remember that project being built and thinking, wow, there's a developer out there that's actually having a go. You know, they're building a bigger building when there's largely just terrace houses and smaller scale buildings happening in that Sunshine Cove area. I was really excited by, you know, the bravery of that, I suppose.
Yeah, we worked with a great developer on that project. Rob from Outham, he really understands the value that an architect can bring to a project, yep, and is excited by the possibilities that a site like that can offer. That's not common though. I mean, a lot of developers, well, let's be blunt, most of the development that happens on the coast doesn't engage or involve a lot of architects. So for you to build a relationship with a developer and for them to actually, that to be a continuous thing it's a rare and beautiful thing. It is, absolutely. There should be a hell of a lot more of it.
well, I'm sure
for all of us.
You're the man to bring it to bear. But that's, I mean, I expect you've nurtured that relationship. It hasn't just happened on its own.
No, it hasn't. I mean, Rob actually is an old friend of mine.
Right.
We studied architecture together. Rob got through a year before he decided he wanted to be a builder rather than an architect. But our first project of note together was the Pigeon Beach Community House, yes, which was a great success. It was a D&C project, my first time working on a D&C project, and
you survived.
Learned a lot. I survived, yes, yeah. And you know, we got a good outcome, and that sort of set the tone for the ability to work together and problem solve and, you know, push each other.
I mean, it's good to hear that, because the D&C process is, you know, a lot of architects are wary of it because you know, it tends to sort of cut back on quality in order to achieve a budget, but also for building owners, it doesn't necessarily guarantee the best result over a long period of time.
No, that's right. I think all parties, both client, builder and architect, need to be still working as a team and have a common goal of not only cost effectiveness or time, but also the quality of the built outcome. Yeah. And you know, in any project, whether it's a D&C project or more formally traditionally built, the best results are when all members of the team are working together with that common goal.
And so there's obviously a continuous feedback loop at the end of each project between you and Rob that allows you then to go on to the next project. But in the conversation that we had before, it sounds like Rob understands that he can unlock the value of complex sites and difficult sites that maybe other developers either don't touch or are a little bit scared of, by using you and knowing that you'll be able to sort of guide him through that process.
That's right, yeah. I mean, whether it's myself or another architect, Rob certainly appreciates the skill set that an architect will bring to a project with respect to maximising yield for the developer, which is obviously important,
Yep.
but also in creating buildings and spaces, be it houses or units, that provide an incredible life experience for the people that use them, which obviously feeds back into the success of their business, the sales records of their business,
Yeah.
and the ongoing sales records for new projects. And that's something that he has spoken to me a lot about and is worthwhile acknowledging, because it's great for us and it's great for them, and ultimately it's great for the end user.
I like the idea of a mandatory 1 year of study of architecture for all developers.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
Sort of get them in the zone.
Yeah, I think they'll appreciate what we do a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also there's nothing like actually building that relationship with a client from the get-go and actually teaching them on the job, if you like.
Yeah.
You spoke about the visual noise in the surrounding area, and that was something you were very aware of when you were approaching the design. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means and explain that concept of visual noise to our audience?
So the site, that whole area was relatively undeveloped. Development had probably been going for maybe 6-8 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a degree of built environment to respond to. A lot of it was large houses on small lots with a real sort of busyness to their form and architectural language. We knew that there was going to be larger commercial buildings right on the edge of it. And we wanted to respond in a way that was of a suitable scale to what the region would become, but also in a way that was almost a calming presence in what is a very sort of visually busy area. So it's one of the larger buildings in that area, but it's also quite simple in its form and its language, and that was very intentional with respect to responding to the context of the immediate built environment. But also that simplicity allows for a very cost-effective construction process.
Yeah. Again, all three projects that we've seen today have talked about the value of simplicity as bringing not just an aesthetic, but actually, I suppose driving the design program and actually, making things a little bit more interesting. It seems it might be something that maybe the audience don't necessarily appreciate, but complexity actually creates a lot of tension within a design. And it's a lot harder to actually make things simple, isn't it?
It is. And look, simplicity, this is a great lesson from modernism really, but simplicity allows for flexibility. So when you have a very simple construction system that doesn't necessarily rely on a heap of load-bearing walls positioned throughout a plan, but rather a sort of exterior skeletal structure, which we utilised in True North, then there's a flexibility within that structure to change that building over time, which I think is very important, particularly in large-scale buildings that use a lot of concrete, a lot of embodied energy materials. If those buildings are flexible and can be adapted to different needs over time, then there's the justification for using those materials.
So was that? I mean, Rob's not the building owner; he's a developer, and they've been sold freehold those lots. But was that part of the architectural programs to make sure that the ground floor stuff could be possibly converted into something else later on?
It wasn't discussed at the time. I mean, it's something that I try and do with all of our design work, and we try and work to very rational grid systems to minimise material waste, work in with typical structural spans, etc. And it's just a default of that process that you end up with a very flexible building system or very flexible structure.
Because that building's going to be there for 50 years. Maybe,
well, that's right.
Longer.
That's right. And it can adapt. It's important that happens, I think.
Yeah.
Rather than tailoring it. I mean, there's obviously situations where a building design should be totally specific to its needs. I mean, the Opera House, for example, right? Sure. I mean, it couldn't be anything other than the Opera House. But buildings like True North, it's very valid, I feel, to make sure that they're flexible enough to change uses over time and grow with a city, which is happening already around it.
Yeah, well, and I suppose that's something that historically the Sunshine Coast community hasn't really understood, and that's growing with density and growing with, as our towns and villages become cities and larger urban things, we need to grow with them as a community, and our expectations need to change over time as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've got a question here from our online audience, Dan, I'm going to throw at you, because we had a bit of a chat offline about shade and other shutters and other bits and pieces. And again, this is another question from Francis. You've got 2 out of 2 today, Francis. You're batting pretty well. And the question from Francis is, big shutters on the east and west, can you buy as standard or are they specially made?
It's a great question. I've often struggled with the lack of off-the-shelf solutions for shading of windows.
Yeah.
We were just talking about how, back in the 50s, even pre-war houses that you see in southeast Queensland, there's so many standard systems that you see on them, shading windows on the east or the west or whatever the case may be. There is available options, but not enough, I don't think. A lot of our buildings find custom solutions, which obviously aren't cheap, but we feel that they offer other value to the building, be it through a system of sliding screens that open up a whole wall rather than just screening a window. But there is some, I think there should be more.
Yeah.
Short answer.
I mean, maybe it was a function of them being a systemised approach to timber buildings pre-war and certainly pre-World War II, that meant that there was a whole bunch of followers and systems that followed those buildings around, and they had these applied add-ons, whether it be metal awnings or timber shutters or other
like a kit of parts.
Yeah,
I think we've lost that, and it's for retrofitting older buildings, I think it's so important to still be able to call on that kit of parts.
Yeah. So there you go, enterprising open houses. There's a business proposition there for someone watching today. They might like to think about it. And architects, I think generally we talk about kits of parts and we talk about systematizing the process of design. That's an obvious value add that we could bring some great benefit climatically to the standard building industry rather than just one-off bespoke houses.
Absolutely.
Dan, thanks for your time today.
Pleasure,
I look forward to you interjecting and throwing in your bit when we have our common discussion later on today.
Awesome.
Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Rightio, we're in the home straight open houses. The last of our 4 design clips today describes the Mary Cairncross Scenic Reserve Building Renewal Project, which is located in Mullaney, and it looks out to our iconic Glasshouse Mountains. A different view from what we have here in front of us today, but nevertheless just as special and important. This project was completed in 2017 and it's collected a number of peer recognised awards. I think it's got 11 to date, certainly punching above its weight as an overachiever. But it's an exemplar of public architecture. It's also been recognised for its approach to sustainability, its innovative interpretation and commercial interiors, and it's also a really great demonstrator about how you can add significant value within a really tight tourism market. So please enjoy our 4th video today.
The 3 key drivers for the project from a council and community perspective was about replacing a facility that was outdated and not really facilitating the services that was required. Also looking at providing a safe opportunity for visitors to view the heritage listed Glasshouse Mountains. And thirdly, trying to capitalise on the opportunities to engage and educate our local community with the rainforest itself.
The Mary Cairncross Scenic Reserve is sited 400 metres above sea level on the Mullaney Escarpment. It has a unique subtropical alpine climate, which is quite different from the coast. We get extreme weather that comes from the southeast predominantly, and we have a benign northerly aspect. We organize the cafe and the lookout terrace as a windbreak facing due south into the prevailing weather. And then the cafe opens in good weather to the south, and in poor weather, it can open to the north. So we've created a little sun trap. And then the Discovery Center faces north as a pavilion that's separated by about 6 meters. So you create a void in the middle that's open to the environment. And then the Discovery Center faces north into the forest. And that gives you this amazing view of the forest with floor-to-ceiling glass and a terrific solar aspect that comes in winter with just the right amount of overhang to heat up the slab and make it comfortable year-round. So we use a combination of fixed glass and louvers. The fixed glass to maximize the view and the louvers to allow maximum ventilation.
The building itself isn't the thing that is the attractor to the site, it's the site itself. So a key part of the design was to actually make the visual impact of the building less. So we worked with the existing stands of trees that were on the site to shield the building from view.
It's a 2-story building, but actually the second story will eventually be a vegetated trellis. Right now you can see the structure of it, but it will actually physically and literally blend in with the canopy.
There's flora and fauna that's of significance from a state level. Within the site, you've got a number of protected animal species. You've got the Richmond birdwing butterfly, for example, the tusked frog. So by pulling the building back, we were able to create another pond close to the edge of the glazing on the north that is an additional habitat for that frog that brings them closer to the building from an interpretive perspective. That's exciting. The construction of the boardwalk was a very interactive process between council and ourselves. The routes were actually the driver of the position of the columns. So we went through the process of looking through what it meant to get an accessible ramp to go up the level. We looked at the experience within the forest and what were the key view lines. We actually located the columns and then worked backwards to design the boardwalk and just created a very narrow corridor to construct the boardwalk.
A number of local advisory groups were established, which were a checkpoint in the local community to ascertain the appetite for what was being proposed, because it was a considerable change as to what was here previously, and there was a lot of connection from the local community in Mary Cancross.
We had Kelly from Focus, who, from an interpretive perspective, who started the journey from the beginning. Having someone on board from the beginning in the design of the whole place, landscape, architecture, interiors, who could tell the stories, portray them effectively, communicate them effectively, and in a fun way that engages with the kids.
That's right. Yeah.
Was particularly exciting.
The Mary Cancross process, I believe, has actually looked holistically at incorporating heritage and cultural heritage and traditional owner views into the building design itself, all of the way through to construction. And in this case, I'm pleased to say that the Ginnabarra people are now a critical part of the post-construction use of the building.
From a design perspective, we're excited about it because I think having that involvement from the beginning, we're able to actually see things in a different way. And just listening is probably the most important thing that we found. We learnt a lot through just listening and having a lot of fun. And it adds another dimension to opportunities that you look at as a designer for a space in a building, or even just what the place will become.
What has happened is incorporated the needs of the Aboriginal people, but also the needs of the non-Aboriginal people too. And it's like it's incorporated. It's like a community centre where it's all about reconciliation. See, the interest that this place has created, and then like we take every opportunity to come up here and be part of it. And it's all about us coming together and being part of something that's very special. Like in our day, we used to call them corroborees, where we used to all come together and have celebration. Now, this place here it symbolises a corroboree. Like we call it a community centre now, where everybody comes together from everywhere, all over the place, tourists and everybody, and to enjoy themselves and appreciate what has been built here for the benefit of the community, not of just one or two people or one group of people, just for everybody. And that's important.
So the plan is very simple. It's just a cruciform shape that opens up towards the view to the Glasshouse Mountains to the south, and then opens up in a glass wall facing the north into the rainforest, and is bisected by an axis to catch the rainforest on the west.
The other thing we did too is use materials of the environment to reinforce those views. So you've got the stone walls that are blades that align with those views. And then you can actually see in some sections of the building, we've created landscape walls that continue on those into the landscape and then are in a direct alignment and access to the mountain beyond.
The concept of the viewing deck was just to take the ground plane and elevate it 1 story. but to make it feel like you're still grounded. And that elevated positions give you the best vantage over the Glasshouse Mountains.
By actually creating views to the rainforest and the tree canopy above, we were able to place the interpretive aspects of the tree canopy up in the upper level of the building. So you can actually directly view and experience almost in probably 270 degrees, the actual experience of the tree canopy.
The design of the building was inspired by its natural setting, which is so unique. The Glasshouse Mountains make this dark bluey black shade in the distance, and we picked up on that color, and we picked up literally on the stone. So we used the basalt to form the anchoring blade walls, which organize the view and the main structure of the building. We then used endemic species of timber. In ironbark for the cladding, we used tallow wood and blackbutt for the internal finishes and for the decking.
And the idea was that the building itself integrates with the site and weathers over time. One of the key aspects of the design of the centre was creating a space where you weren't actually entering to the face of a building. You're actually entering into the precinct, if you like, between the two buildings with the view as the focus. So by activating the edge of that through the cafe edge, you've got the viewing deck that views down on the entry, and then the bridge that floats within that view as you enter. You create the activity and the vibrance of the space.
And it makes a meeting point for when people come to the centre. You always say, we'll meet in the forecourt under the bridge typically.
I think one of the fun aspects of design too was creating spaces for kids. So one of the fun things is we've created a space down on the north that is close to the pond with low height windows. It's a very confined and very child proportioned space, so they can just sit and view kind of tucked away from the main space and enjoy that interaction with the environment. One of the key outcomes we were after was for all aspects of the Rainforest Discovery Centre, the cafe, to be accessible. So with a combination between the boardwalk and the lift and the subtle changes in level, we were able to achieve that.
The building is self-sufficient. It harvests its own rainwater. It uses electricity that is farmed actually off-site by the council's solar PV farm. And it's solar passively designed, so it's thermally coupled to the ground. It has no heating and cooling except for two small sections of the building, but generally it's passively heated and cooled. And by thermally coupling it to the ground at about 19 degrees, it keeps it comfortable year round. The ventilation also adds to that. That was a fundamental part of the resilience of this building, is not relying on, reticulated water. It manages its own sewage as well. This is typical for sites up in Mullaney that are in a rural setting like this.
A lot of visitors are time constrained, or they might have mobility issues, and as a result they can't go for a walk in the forest. Whereas now we have an elevated walkway which starts inside the building and goes around into the forest, and it's quite quick and easy for them to access, so that actually enhances their experience. And another example would be the viewing platform overlooking the Glasshouse Mountains means that people no longer need to run across the road and don't even need to leave the reserve, and they can get those wonderful views of the Glasshouse Mountains.
It's certainly been an interesting journey, having been here now for 5 years, looking at the visitation prior to the construction of this building being 75,000 to where we are now, just short of 200,000. It's quite remarkable of how the building has facilitated and enabled that process to take place.
Hello online audience, welcome back to Bankfoot House Heritage Precinct. If you haven't been here before, you really need to come down and visit this place, not just to experience this building, but to really ground yourselves within this fantastic setting of the Glasshouse Mountains. Obviously and clearly one of the most iconic places on the Sunshine Coast, but I hadn't been here for a long time, but it is really a beautiful place to come to. So put that in your diary note and make an appointment to come out and have a look at this beautiful place. So you've just seen the fourth of our, and the last of our feature videos for today, but we're not done yet. We've got some more things to show you and I hope some more engaging conversation to present to you and immerse you in, and hopefully some provocations and some ideas to get the online chatter really going. But as we have done with the other videos, it's my pleasure to introduce two of the key architects and designers from the project that you've just viewed. So I'd like you all, or I'd like to welcome, on your behalf audience, Phil Jackson, who's the director of Guymer Bailey Architects, and Norm Richards, who's director of Norm Richards Building Design and Interiors. Welcome, guys. Congratulations on another fabulous building. You know, one of the things about living on the Sunshine Coast is that from time to time we have punters come up from Brisbane or elsewhere, and we've got to take them out and show them around, and we've all done it. But after a while, you start to run out of great places. Not run out of them, but you think, God, I have to go back there again. But like all of us, I've taken friends and family up to that building, and every time I love it. It's such a fantastic setting, and you really have captured and crystallised all of those place-based values that make the Mary Cairncross Park so beautiful. And then you've added this extraordinary value with a new building. It's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What you worked together, I imagine, over a long period of time, putting that project together. Now that, it's been successful and it's starting to settle into its landscape, what are the things that you can reflect on that you both learned together going through that process?
Yeah, I think for us, we really learnt a lot out of the process from working with Norm, who lives just around the corner. So he knew the site extensively.
You're a local.
Yeah. Yes. So for us, we're just listening the whole time to what Norm's talking about with the breezes and the climate and the uniqueness of that site. And for me, going up there as a kid with my family, living close and seeing that view and that connection to the rainforest was always just really, really special.
Yeah.
So
any key learnings for you, Norm?
I think it was a really nice chance to put into the public domain a lot of the ideas we have about view, sensitivity to sight, and this idea that the architecture can be kind of downplayed and take a secondary role, and it just becomes a way to experience this incredible environment. And like you said, we're lucky enough to live just down the road, so we know it well, and it was really nice to get to do this at a public level.
I mean, the great thing about being involved in a project around the corner from yourself, but it being successful means you can continue to live in that community. Could have gone the other way.
Actually, that's not a subtle point. There was a lot riding on this. If we hadn't done a good job, it would have been tricky.
Yeah, it was dearly
so
loved.
I felt the pressure.
But that idea, you talked about dialing down or dialing down the ego. I mean, the design process can be, well, ego is involved because we bring our skills as designers to the table, and we have to learn to modulate ego to a certain extent. But it sounds to me you both have said that the process of listening was really fundamental to getting the best out of this design. And listening is the opposite of ego in many ways. It's putting yourself as a vessel to listen to your clients and your stakeholders. I mean, were you really wary of that at the time, or is it something that you've sort of noticed since the project is finished?
It's probably a little bit of both. During the time, there was just that many stakeholders, and there was just that many aspects of the site that were just so special that we really had to protect through there. And to protect them, we needed to learn about them and their environment, and particularly with our landscape team around the flora and fauna of the site. How do you bring it in? How do you protect it? How do you look after it, but still let everyone interact with it in a safe way, but exciting way? That's probably the key thing there. But I think for us initially, working with Norm and that listening, and then I think one of the key groups was the Friends.
Yes.
The Friends of the Gardens were just amazing, I thought, through there, and very generous with their time with us, and they knew intimately the site. So.
Yeah, well, you're lucky to have such an informed stakeholder group who knew the site intimately and to a level that you really needed to sort of drill down to understand you know, all of that. I think a lot of people, a lot of the community, I think a lot of people have this view of architects that we bring our own ideas and our knowledge to a project, and that's what drives it. But and what you're identifying, Phil, is the fact that the process of design is a learning process. And in fact, we, you know, again, addressing your point, Norm, if you turn up with your ego and you assume you know it all, it's not going to work out very well for you.
That's the line you tread. You bring your expertise and then you take a back seat. And we were given a list of wants and don't want from the community. And, you know, I think we were able to bring that to fruition.
Yes.
And, you know, hats off to the council for coming along with our vision and pushing us.
Yeah.
Because we actually developed 3 schemes.
Right.
We had an initial scheme, and then we did a second scheme, and then they said, well, can you combine the 2?
Right.
And we said no, and then we did. And actually, don't tell anyone, but you actually get a better product that way out of you designers when you push them.
Yeah, well, your secret's safe. Nobody knows about it.
No,
don't worry.
No.
So, but the council as a client were obviously engaged in directing and advising the design process. There's a good solid feedback loop with your client.
Yes, council was involved, and we called them CDAP, the Community Design Advisory Panel, which was everything from scientific members of the Sunshine Coast University to the local Rotary to the tourism board. Everybody came on board, as long as as well as local flora and fauna experts. Yeah. So it was a big panel of expertise that we were sort of juggling, I would say. If you want to know,
Well, that's telling you, it's great, one, that you've got access to that information, but you've still got to synthesize it and bring it to, you've got to bring it to a point, don't you?
Yeah.
You've got to process that information and throw some things away, I suppose.
And I think that's one of the things we really enjoy about architecture. It's you're taking all of these threads from all of these different pieces and then just creating something unique from that. It's pretty
it's
amazing.
a simple building, really, but the challenge of bringing all of those interests together and making something simple and difficult, but rise to it.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things that I think having an interpretive consultant on the team from the beginning too, to have all of those aspects for the interiors, architecture, landscape, and the interp, it's just really, really exciting.
I mean, it's great for you as designers because you've got a bigger group of collaborators, which means you're going to get better ideas, and you know, it makes it a better process for you, I expect.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the questions from the audience was it a requirement to work with traditional owners, or did you initiate it? And either way, how did it go?
Yeah, well, the project, the CDAP panel, traditional owners were on that panel through there, and meeting Uncle Ken was, I think, one of the highlights for us on the project because he brought such richness to the job. He was just amazing. He was fun. He to sit back, listen to him through that process and see things in a different way, and then also the strategy that Kelly, who went through from an interpretive perspective of intertwining that whole story inside and out through all the interpretive aspects, not just in one aspect, was really a fun and exciting thing to develop with council and everyone involved. Yeah, it's really fun.
And that just from personally, as a new Australian, I'd say that interaction has been part of a spiritual journey for me in understanding this place and beginning to understand the connection to the place.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, the process of engaging with traditional owners is, it's de rigueur now. It's part of the process, and it's right that it's so. But it wasn't that long ago that we weren't engaged in that process. We weren't learning those stories, and I certainly think it's a feature of the evolution of Sunshine Coast design is that we as designers are engaging authentically, I think, with First Nations people and allowing them to work with us to provide and reinterpret or represent these stories back to the community.
Yeah, and it is sustainability in itself. It's where it should be.
So any other learnings? I know we spoke before, Phil, about Guymer Bailey's work in particular has been a sort of a continuum of projects, and you as a group tend to take the work onto the next project. Any other learnings for you from Mary Cairncross?
Yeah, it was funny because it was a bit of a progression through a couple of projects leading into this one, particularly the Maroochy Arts and Ecology Centre before then, and where we were working with the Friends previously on that project. And I think one of the things that I think we were discussing is what we said before about the importance of listening. Like for us, it was a really deeper reflection now when we've been talking about it again, just how much we learnt, and then it's actually changed not changed, but kind of made us be more aware of that with our future projects and just developing that relationship that I think a lot of the people in today's discussions were also talking about, particularly with your clients, and about really making sure you just engage deeply in that way, and the richness that comes from that.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for your time and your insights today. You're going to sit on the bench and we're going to do a bit of manoeuvring to get our other special guests into the room. So for you at home or wherever you happen to find yourself, online audience, that, as I said, that is the last of our 4 feature videos, but there's something else that we have, a few more things that we have up our sleeve for you. But I'd like to see some Facebook love online, some hearts and some thumbs up and some other bits and pieces for all of our videos and for all of our special guests today. But I'd also like you just to sit back and enjoy. We put together a highlights reel from this year's Sunshine Coast Open House, and I'd like you to enjoy that now. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the highlights reel. I thought it might be a bloopers reel with a bit of swearing on it, but it wasn't to be. So, hopefully it's been enjoyable. So through the magic of TV or online forum, we now have our special guests beside. They've joined us on the bench, and it's kind of a different setup to what I've ever done before with all this COVID social distancing. It's kind of like a room of people who are having an argument and they're just not talking to each other. But anyway, welcome to everyone. So you will have seen most of these people already today, but I'd like to introduce you in no particular order because I've got to make this up as I go. Sarah Chalkley, Sunshine Coast Council Design and Placemaking Services. Hello, Sarah. Welcome. In the flesh this time, not virtually as you were before. Dan Sparks from Sparks Architects. Welcome, Dan. Phil Jackson and Norm, who we've just already seen, so we kind of know you guys, welcome. And Lindy Atkin back again from Bark Architects. So we're just going to conduct a little bit of a Q&A. I've got some prepared answers here that have come from our audience. What I'm hoping that we'll do, we've got probably 20 minutes or half an hour. I'm looking sneakily over to our production team, but we've got enough time to really get our teeth or sink our teeth into some of the aspects around Sunshine Coast design. I'm hoping that we'll cover off on this notion of custodianship and protecting community and other values through the design process. And I think it's also time that we start to talk a little bit more about the value that architecture and design can bring back, not just to our clients, but to the broader community. But I did want to just cover off on one quick question to you guys about Mary Cairncross, which has just been pointed out to me. I'm sitting in front of it and I didn't even realise, sorry about that. But there's a question from the audience about what was the timeline for the Mary Cairncross project in terms of the design phase and construction. How long did it go for?
Yeah, sure.
Can you remember? Too traumatised.
I think this. Norm and I were just talking about this before. I think it was late 2014 was the first site visit for the brief and the project, and then I think it design phase went till I think it was completed in 2017.
Yeah,
I think.
right. So it's a 3 or 4 year.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, a year and a bit of design phase.
Yep. Okay. Right. And I suppose one of the challenges of having so many stakeholders is you've got to actually consult with them. So it does tend to, that process tends to extend a fair bit.
And get funding.
Yeah, funding. Oh, money. God, talk about money. Goodness me. Speaking of money, Dan, I've got a question from you from the audience. Someone has asked, how do we get other developers to follow your lead? Going on from this conversation about designers and architects building wholesome, productive relationships with developers and changing them, but also getting a better outcome in the process.
It's a great question.
Any tips?
Difficult one to answer. I think the answer is in letting the market find the solution. So hopefully buildings which architects have direct involvement with are more appealing to the market and the greater community, and developers start to pick up on this a little more.
Yep.
It certainly would be a ridiculous challenge trying to bring all the developers along the ride with respect to informing them more on architectural processes, etc. Though I think a lot more are getting it. I think it is changing. True North was done 10 years ago, so I think a lot's happened since then. But obviously, we need a lot more of it.
Yeah.
And like a lot of these things, the market needs to be the mechanism.
Yeah. And to that point, the market has changed over in 10 years, and increased sort of competition means that you would think architects and designers have got skills that can give clients and other developers a competitive advantage.
That's right. And developers like Alton realise that, and they choose to work with architects and have all the way through. And I'm certainly seeing it with a lot more of the larger developers, that architects are engaged in the process a lot more, which is great.
Good. Okay, so hopefully that covers off on at least one question online. I have another question here from JF Clark. A little bit more controversial. It's possibly a scenario that all of us have been in as designers at some point, and it says, I would like to know how to talk someone out of a bad design layout. That sounds like a relationship ending move. Lindy, have you ever had to sort of go down that path and give some sage advice to someone who was making some bad design decisions?
Yes.
Apart from Steve, that is.
No, not at all. Actually, that partnership works really well because we obviously have very aligned ideas, but sometimes it's really good to have an alternative idea. Look, yes, sometimes clients come to us with a preconceived idea of what they would really like, and that's not necessarily always the best solution in response to the particular context or the climate or even the function. So it is it's a very careful road that you have to tread to, I guess, work out how to say what it is about that design idea that's not quite right, and you have to be very tactful doing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, design ideas come with personality, don't they? They come with investment, and people can. We've all learned at architecture school. It's very hard. It's very hard to be criticised for your work, but it's really easy to go in hard and criticise somebody else's work. But there's a lot of emotion in design. You invest a lot of time and thought in it. You can get yourself into trouble pretty quickly, I suppose.
I think if you just go back to the fundamentals and say, look, it's not going to work because it's not getting the winter sun, or it's not breathing properly, or it's going to be awkward having a dog leg in a hallway, or if you go back to things that people can easily relate to, I find it a lot easier to get things over the line.
Yep. I think one of the challenges is having conversations as professionals with expertise, with people that are coming to a topic or a design, afresh, is trying to establish a common language or a common language to talk about design. I mean, when you're dealing with lots of stakeholders, some of whom are informed, Phil, is that a challenge for you?
Yeah,
I suppose that's where listening comes in, doesn't it?
It does, and I think it's time. Time's the other thing that is the challenge we find with projects, because sometimes you just need time to just unpack all of that information and develop the relationships.
Well, we covered off on that with that conversation with Tim Bennetton earlier about the beauty and the luxury at times of being able to invest time with your client, but in an hourly rate cost environment, it can be really challenging to create that space in a busy working life, but also to invest that time with your client. But you find that it's worth it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think because it's a learning process, it's always back and forth.
Yeah.
Because there might be some key ideas, and I think sometimes teasing out those key ideas that were in the inverted commas bad design, you can then incorporate them in other ways if they were kind of in alignment with where you were heading, or where it might spark another way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to that question though, still, it's an excellent question. And I've just thought about an example where, you know, a client has come to us and they've said they've been to Bali Hicks, they love the Balinese architecture, they really would like to recreate that, you know, in their new home. And we like to sort of say, in answer to that question, well, what is it about that architecture that you like? So is it the thatched roof or, you know, the grass walls, or is it the spatial qualities because of the light or the way that you live, the indoor-outdoor space? Because if it's that second set of qualities that people are looking for, then there are other ways of doing it rather than taking the iconography of the look of something.
Yeah.
It's more about how something should feel, and that's what we like to really try to understand.
Well, that certainly came out in the Two Tree House video, that the idea that buildings can make you feel in a particular way, you know, if they're well designed. It's a lovely notion. You think of buildings as sort of static, you know, objective things, but they're not. They can induce feelings in you. That's why I suppose
they should induce feelings.
They should.
Yeah.
Sometimes not good, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, you know, but that's brutalist architecture for you. But anyway. But I think one of the things you're touching on though, Lindy, is in part about the application of ideas. So an idea in Bali or whatever might come out of the local vernacular, but you try to apply it to Tasmania or somewhere else, and of course it's not going to work. We have a subtle version of that here on the Sunshine Coast, where we've got design approaches and strategies that work very well on the coast. You try to take them to Mullaney or up on the hinterland where it's colder in winter or whatever, or damp, or rainy like today, and they don't work. And of course there was a question, I'm aware that there's an online discussion, I think when we spoke about the breezeway notion and the idea of a breezeway in the middle, I think I'm led to believe there was an online discussion today about breezeways and you know, how they might work. You wouldn't do a breezeway in Mullaney, for instance, necessarily, because it's a different kind of sort of climatic sort of approach than it would be to the coast. So, I mean, I think that's just a conversation about using our skills to make sure that ideas are applied appropriately, and that one idea doesn't sort of just gets.
It's interesting though, we have actually done a project with the breezeway Milady, and our clients just loved it because it made them go outside and feel that there is this kind of incredible misty cloud that's through there, and what the differential of the indoor to the outdoor is.
You didn't make your clients walk outside again, did you, Lindy?
Yes.
Good on you.
I think Norm has a beautiful description of Mullaney climate. I remember you talking about the microclimate of Mullaney compared to the beach.
What did I say?
When you were just talking about the Mullaney cloud that comes through.
Well, yeah, I remember sitting in our living room and we were having a conversation across the sofa, and a cloud went through the living room and white out in our lounge. So indoor-outdoor living's great, but you know, you gotta know when to close the door.
Yeah, walking clouds, Norm. Right, okay, I'm with you. So just going back to that conversation about establishing a design language and establishing a base which we can all have, you know, a productive and useful conversation, not just with our clients, but with the community. I'd like to bring you into the conversation here, Sarah, because you've been instrumental and a key driver behind the Yellow Book, which is about Sunshine Coast design. And for a start, it's an amazing asset that we have to talk to our community about design. But I think what it does, most importantly, is it establishes a starting point for a conversation. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that starting point is the fact that the book is based on what the community told us they love about the Sunshine Coast. Yep. So they've told us these 4 values that they want to see enhanced and protected into the future. And that's the strength of the book. And that's the message out to not only the community, but developers and others, is that if we work with those values, we'll end up with something that's really special to hear.
And I know, because I saw the process rolling out, but it was a widely consultative process with a lot of listening. So getting back to Phil and Norm's conversation about the value of listening to collect knowledge and then redistill it, that was a key principle in putting the Yellow Book together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's helping people to actually relate to the book. And the whole premise of the book is to help educate and to inspire and encourage design that's best for here, for this place. And, you know, it's very much about an education piece. It's about making sure that people understand how to design for here, what's important for here.
And the proposition which we're trying to uncover today is that there is inherent value in getting those things right.
100%. And I think my experience was that when I was moving back to the Sunshine Coast a couple of years ago, I was looking for somewhere to rent, and more recently for somewhere to buy. And the challenge that I've found is that this whole idea that the Sunshine Coast is full of amazing architecture, it's actually not. You know, there's these gems out there, and there's a lot of architecture that's really special and relevant to this place, but there's a lot that's creeping in that's actually really average, and the generic and the cookie cutter approach that isn't working for here. And often people are moving up from another state and they don't really get that indoor outdoor living. And the book is about helping people to understand what to look for. And it's a challenge because there's not a lot out there that really does relate to this place.
I think what's really important about this book, and particularly because it's actually had a bunch of landscape architects behind a lot of the ideas for it, is that landscape is just so critical. You know, greenery, plants, vegetation, you know, sometimes they're taken for granted. But I think what this really shows is that when you enjoy a place, and I posed this question to, you know, to the group when we had one of those workshops, if you picture the most beautiful place that you can, you know, imagine somewhere on the coast, picture everything that you love about it, and then visualize it with no plants and no trees. Is it still as beautiful?
No,
I don't think it's
not
the same.
No. But that presents a challenge for us on the Sunshine Coast, where we have a history, and our history of design has been largely, we're known for buildings in landscape and buildings with vegetation and the like around it, and that's fine. But we're moving into an era of increased urbanism, where architects and designers are finding solutions to densify our cities and get more value out of them, because it's more sustainable to have a degree of density. And it's harder when we've got more dense buildings, zero lot boundaries and small lot houses and apartments, to get vegetation into those sorts of things. You know, it's a kind of a constant challenge. And we are, you know, urban environments are less verdant, they're less green. So, you know, we've got to kind of manage that. I noticed, Dan, on True North, there's a lot of green wall on there. Now, my understanding is that the green wall movement, or not movement, but the approach, is not something that can be certified by a lot of private certifiers. So people aren't putting in green walls these days. Is that something you've experienced on your projects? Because they're pretty challenging.
Yeah. I mean, if you're wanting to use it for environmental reasons, for thermal management, for example, then a certifier or an energy efficiency assessor can't actually include it, which is obviously ridiculous. But it is a growing thing, which might die or drop back in winter, or whatever the case may be. So they find it challenging in that regard. But that's certainly not a reason not to use it, because we know not only can they shade a building, but obviously plants, you know, add so much value to your general sense of well-being as well. So in a building like True North, which is quite dense and does take up a fair bit of that site, it was, you know, one of the few areas that we could start integrating some intensive landscaping, and it has a lot of different benefits beyond just shading. But we ran it over a wall which was almost like a sunshade off the line of enclosure of the building anyway. There's a big void behind it, which is there to allow courtyard gardens to grow up vertically as well. So it's like a 3-layer process to the east and the west elevation of True North. And the green screening is just one of a system that we've used. But vertical landscaping is something that we need to look at a lot more in our buildings as our cities become denser. Obviously green roofs as well.
Danny, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, given that you and Phil in particular are probably at the more commercial end of the sector, are you getting pushback from your clients and developers when you try to put in green strategies or mature vegetation into development in urban areas? Or are developers understanding that there's value in vegetation because people are more likely to buy and love, you know, a development that's greener?
I'll let Phil go. You go, Phil.
I think for us, because it's really around the ethos of what we are really passionate about. I think we talk about it from the beginning. So it's a key part of the design, the process we're undertaking, but also the design conversation all the way through. And you know, particularly for Mary, that was integral. That was key within that. and really much a measure of time as that grows with the whole environment. And when you mentioned also the small lot housing, for example, I think that's one of the really exciting challenges, is particularly with the great work that Lindy and all you guys do, Dan, is indoor-outdoor. So, borrowing that landscape space out of all of your rooms is just so key. And it's and that's a great way we often discuss it, in terms of the sliding door, similar to what we have in front of us now, can come back. Your room is actually to your boundary. So, having those kind of conversations.
So we can have footprint and we can have enclosed spaces, but they don't always have to be indoor.
Exactly.
And so we can have an urban footprint that might be 100% site cover, but provided that it's permeable, we can get some vegetation in there, we can have our cake and eat it.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because those external landscape spaces are actually less expensive to build than they're built for. So, but they add so much value. So, we need to be looking at the spaces in between a lot more when we design, I think.
The negative spaces. I think that's something that can be a lot more council driven as well, rather than developer driven, with respect to advocating integration of landscaping into buildings, not just around buildings, but into buildings. During COVID, we've experienced how important food systems are, and the integration of food production in our buildings through green walls and internal gardens and stuff is something that I think we need to be looking into a hell of a lot more as well. Food security.
Look, you're right. I mean, local architect Sam Taylor at a forum recently, she was sort of speculating and thinking about what she's learned through the whole COVID thing. And she said she's focused more, and she feels her friends and everybody else have focused more on the value of greenery inside their buildings because they've been stuck in their houses. And hopefully there's a shift in the zeitgeist around the value of greenery. There's people that have had a different experience. So.
There's absolutely no negatives involved with integrating landscaping into buildings.
So we're solving all the world's problems here today, open houses. We don't have a lot of time left, but in the spirit of engaging the Unimind here about our expertise to solve some of these wicked problems, I have another one for you to think about, colleagues. So one of the questions from the audience is, what do we need to do next to keep accelerating good design outcomes for the coast? We are still seeing boxes being built everywhere. Who wants to tackle that one?
Well, I put that across to Sarah, actually, because I think...
Nice handball. We're a few hours out from the AFL Grand Final, and that was a big handball. Well done.
Well, mainly because I think Sarah has immersed herself into the communities that need to think more about this. And you've kind of looked at what we need to do to send a message to, people to inspire them to think about it a little bit more. I think you're also aiming for inspiring developers and those groups that actually provide housing in particular, and that's why I think True North is a really inspiring example to include in this conversation. So I don't know, I'd like to handball it to Sarah.
It is about education and helping the general public and the masses to understand what good design is and how to find it, how to achieve it,
how to ask
use
for it.
Yeah, to use architects and ask for help in designing or renovating a home. I think that there's a lot more that real estate agents can do. So that's been a conversation that my team and I have been having more broadly across a number of sectors.
Front line, really?
At the front line, that's right. And really helping people to understand what, that good design will enhance their lives and make it cheaper. No, it doesn't have to cost more. Make it cheaper, make it more livable. And I think that, there's opportunities, even the real estate boom here on the Sunshine Coast at the moment. There's an opportunity the realestate.com to actually flag where there is good design, flag those houses that are architect designed so that, people can actually go and have a look and see the difference between a box and something that's well designed.
And sustainably designed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think events like this in opening up homes to the general public and helping people to come along and see what a well-designed home looks and feels like. Incredibly, Airbnb market is exposing people to houses and styles that they don't have for themselves. And I've heard people say, I stayed in an amazing Airbnb. I want to actually buy or I want to renovate my house to feel like the Airbnb that I stayed in. So I think a lot of it is about encouraging the general public to understand better what good design is.
One of the things that I've certainly noticed is that apart from the fact that Australians love to hate local government, and it's kind of like it's one of the things we do really, really well. There is a huge expectation that council fix all these problems or show the leadership around it, and we know that it doesn't work like that. We've all had experiences where there's been good policy put up through planning schemes and other things, only to find the development industry instrumental in pulling a lot of those initiatives out because they say it's green tape or it's too costly, etc., etc. As far as I can see, the only way to kind of break that cycle is for the sector and for us as well to show some leadership, not just with our clients in the development sector, but also with the broader community. So, open house audience, open house is certainly one of those great tools that we can use to start those conversations. But there's more that we as a sector need to do, I think, to be to lead and
well, interestingly, some of the developers are leading, and they've come to us with the Sunshine Coast Design Book, which I should have one on my lap, and I don't. That's very remiss. But they've come to us really wanting to provide a building or a home that really suits what it is that the community want. And there have been a number of developers that have actually embraced the Sunshine Coast Design Book and wanting to achieve those outcomes that are explained in the book. And
so going back to the question, actually, I think Sarah and her team are developing a checklist at the moment. So to answer that question directly, what can be done to lift the design.
Keep accelerating good design outcomes.
There's a tool already that's being developed so that you can actually, use that when you're shopping, when you're briefing your architect or designer.
Going through the process, and you use that checklist as a reminder to achieve good design.
So there you go, online audience. If you haven't got your yellow book and haven't bought it, you can download it as a PDF, I understand.
For free.
For free.
Yes.
So you can do this at home. Start your own homework, everybody. And I think we've got a copy of it coming out very, very, very shortly.
We do. Thank you.
The yellow book
it
itself.
should have been on my lap the whole time.
Another initiative that the Institute of Architects, who partnered with Renew recently, did was an architect speed date where a bunch of architects from Brisbane and Sunshine Coast put themselves online for 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon, and they were matched up with people from the community who wanted design ideas resolved for free. And it was for those of us who were involved, it was a fabulous exercise. One, because it showcased how architects can work off the bat to solve people's problems, but it was a free process, and I think a lot of people were really encouraged. And for many, it was their first experience engaging with an architect and understanding the power of design and being able to solve some of their problems. So those sorts of initiatives where we as a profession get out there and really engage and listen, listen to potential clients, but also to the broader community. We have to start thinking of those sorts of things, I think.
And I should say, look, the Institute of Architects also provides a lot of assistance to the general public if they want to work out how to find an architect, how to look for somebody, and what the values of good design are as well. So.
Well, we were never going to get to all of the solutions today, but I think there have been some really fantastic ideas that have come from our conversation today. I can't stop thinking about the fact that all of the projects that were highlighted today spoke about the value of simplicity and the challenge in achieving it. But for me, all of those projects, you've all told us and told us as an audience that the key to achieving simplicity isn't just about the design process, but it's also about having a really well-informed client who perhaps has modest means or modest needs and doesn't want everything but the kitchen sink, and is prepared to actually compromise on what some of their needs might be in order to achieve a more sustainable outcome. So they're two sorts of things that have come out of today. We've spoken about, and I think we've uncovered a lot of the values or some of the value that design can bring to our clients, whether they be developers or mum and dads off the street. We haven't really touched on some of those broader community aspects of design other than the Mary Cairncross Park project, which is significant in itself. But there's been a lot of great discussion. So for all of you, thank you for being our special guests today. And thanks for those like Tim and Lydia and others who've already had to leave, sadly. But it's been a great conversation. The conversation is continuing online, and I expect Like all things on social media, it will continue for some time. I'm told that the conversation on Facebook is very civil. And so this clearly isn't Twitter, where you're all slagging each other off. That's brilliant. So good on you, audience. Keep that going. And I can't wait to get off here and get onto my phone so I can actually have a look at how that conversation has been panning out. So I'd like you all to do a round of virtual applause for our in-house special guests, Sarah Chalkley, Lindy Atkin. I've done it here. I knew I'd get Norm. I can't remember your last name. Norman Richards. I apologise for that. And Phil and Dan, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Phil.
Rightio. So, online audience, that concludes, I think, the formal part of our presentation today, our open house online forum for 2020. I hope you've all enjoyed the proceedings and the experience, and you've dipped in and got out of what you needed. And we encourage you to share your clips, the clips that you've seen today, with your family and friends, and possibly your future architects, the people that you might want to collaborate with. And I'd like you also to think about and reflect on how we all as a community can continue to celebrate not just good design, but the role it can play in enhancing the value of our beautiful region through place-based design and sustainable subtropical design. So on behalf of the Sunshine Coast Open House Organising Committee, I look forward to seeing you all again in person when we can get back to those times and when we get to reopen the doors for open house in 2021. So thank you for your contribution, thank you for your comments and your questions, and thank you for your time and input into today's session.